In such fortunate moments as I fall asleep, I know beyond doubt what the real center of my own life is. That time which is past and lost and yet is permanent. The enduring moment. The heart of warmth. I'm just a poor wayfaring stranger traveling through. Hi, this is Tara Blair, and welcome to Ivy Reads, a series in which your honorable narrator narrates with a little less precision. In fact, just shares with you some of my favorite passages from some of my favorite books over the years, without going into all the effort and planning that a recorded audiobook usually has. This isn't performed work. This isn't carefully edited work. This is just me sharing with you pieces of prose that have spoken to me deeply through my life. So take a sip from your imaginary cup of tea and let me share a little bit of a book with you. This is a passage and then a second passage from The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula LeGuin. Certainly one of the books that has woven itself so deeply into my consciousness. I find phrases of it coming to mind with almost every significant event of my life. There's something about The Left Hand of Darkness that is so universal to the human experience. And yet she never, ever writes a book wielding a 2x4 with the words universal human experiences as expressed through mucking about with your perception of gender. No. She's just telling a beautiful, beautiful story of love, and love is a universal thing in all of its forms. Sometimes, as I am falling asleep in a dark, quiet room, I have, for a moment, a great and treasurable illusion of the past. The wall of a tent leans up over my face, not visible, but audible, a slanting plane of faint sound, the susurrus of blown snow. Nothing can be seen. The light emission of the Chabe stove is cut off, and it exists only as a sphere of heat, a heart of warmth. The faint dampness and confining clang of my sleeping bag, the sound of the snow, barely audible. Estrevin's breathing as he sleeps. Darkness. Nothing else. We are inside, the two of us, in shelter, at rest, at the center of all things. Outside, as always, lies the great darkness, the cold, death's solitude. In such fortunate moments as I fall asleep, I know beyond doubt what the real center of my own life is. That time which is past and lost and yet is permanent. The enduring moment. The heart of warmth. I am not trying to say that I was happy during those weeks of hauling a sledge across an ice sheet in the dead of winter. I was hungry, overstrained, and often anxious, and it all got worse the longer it went on. I certainly wasn't happy. Happiness has to do with reason, and only reason earns it. What I was given was the thing you can't earn and can't keep, and often don't even recognize at the time. I mean joy. That passage has always been one of my favorite pieces of literature ever put to page. And you don't have to know anything about the book. She has made clear a feeling that we have all had, and done it, of course, only as beautifully as leGuin can. But I do want to read another passage out of the book that is kind of the heart of the book itself. And again, it's leGuin describing something universal, this time about, well, I won't use the actual word until I've read the actual passage, so here we go. Mind speech was the only thing I had to give Estreven, out of all my civilization, my alien reality in which he was so profoundly interested. I could talk and describe endlessly, but that was all I had to give. Indeed, it may be the only important thing we have to give to winter. But I can't say that gratitude was my motive for infringing on the law of cultural embargo. I was not paying my debt to him. Such debts remain owing. Estraven and I had simply arrived at the point where we shared whatever we had that was worth sharing. I expect it will turn out that sexual intercourse is possible between Githinian double-sexed and Hainish norm one-sexed human beings, though such intercourse will inevitably be sterile. It remains to be proved. Estraven and I proved nothing except, perhaps, a rather subtler point. The nearest to crisis that our sexual desires brought us was on a night early in the journey, our second night up on the ice. We had spent all day struggling and backtracking in the cut-up, crevassed area east of the fire hills. We were tired that evening, but elated, sure that a clear course would soon open out ahead. But after dinner, Estraven grew taciturn and cut my talk off short. I said at last, after a direct rebuff, "Harth, I have said something wrong again. Please tell me what it is." He was silent. "I've made some mistake in Shifgrathor. I'm sorry, I can't learn. I've never even really understood the meaning of the word." Shifgrathor. It comes from an old word for shadow. We were both silent for a little, and then he looked at me with a direct, gentle gaze. His face in the reddish light was soft, as vulnerable, as remote as the face of a woman who looks at you out of her thoughts and does not speak. And I saw then again, and for good, what I had always been afraid to see, and had pretended not to see in him, that he was a woman as well as a man. Any need to explain the sources of that fear vanished with the fear. What I was left with was, at last, an acceptance of him as he was. Until then, I had rejected him, refused him his own reality. He had been quite right to say that he, the only person on Gethin who trusted me, was the only Githinian I distrusted. For he was the only one who had entirely accepted me as a human being, who had liked me personally and given me entire personal loyalty, and who therefore had demanded of me an equal degree of recognition, of acceptance. I had not been willing to give it. I had been afraid to give it. I had not wanted to give my trust, my friendship, to a man who was a woman who was a man. He explained stiffly and simply that he was in Kemmer and had been trying to avoid me insofar as one of us could avoid the other. "I must not touch you," he said, with extreme constraint. Saying that, he looked away. I said, "I understand. I agree completely." For it seemed to me, and I think to him, that it was from that sexual tension between us, admitted now and understood but not assuaged, that the great and sudden assurance of friendship between us rose. A friendship so much needed by both in our exile, and already so well proved in the days and nights of our bitter journey, that it might as well be called now as later love. But it was from the difference between us, not from the affinities and likenesses, but from the difference that the love came. And it was itself the bridge, the only bridge, across what divided us. For us to meet sexually would be for us to meet once more as aliens. We had touched in the only way we could touch. We left it at that. I do not know if we were right. What is it about that passage that is so profoundly universal? The idea of the profundity of choosing friendship over not even romance. Friendship can have plenty of romance in it. I mean, fandom internet has coined the word bromance for a reason. But to choose not to have a sexual expression of that deep attraction, affection, commitment, respect, all of those possible things, but instead to choose friendship. It's extremely hard to do. Most of us choose to walk away from a circumstance in which we are deeply attracted to someone, but for whatever reason, we'll never have a romantic relationship with that person. But All of us have imagined it or read it or seen it in fandom, seen it on TV shows with the bromance happening right before our very eyes. It is an astonishing experience because you realize in that act of rejection of, for want of a better word, abstinence, which is a horrible freighted word these days, from taking the relationship into the realm of sexuality, committed romantic relationship, that you see the person whole in a way that it's very difficult to see a romantic partner as whole or to see a friend as whole, because all of your perception is so heightened and yet never released. The passage continues. We talked some more that night, and I recall being very hard put to answer coherently when he asked me what women were like. We were both rather stiff and cautious with each other for the next couple of days. A profound love between two people involves, after all, the power and chance of doing profound hurt. It would never have occurred to me before that night that I could hurt Estraven. Now that the barriers were down, the limitation, in my terms, of our converse and understanding seemed intolerable to me. Quite soon, 2 or 3 nights later, I said to my companion as we finished our dinner, a special treat, sugared haddock porridge to celebrate a 20-mile run, "Last night, that night in the corner red dwelling, you said you wished I'd tell you more about paraverbal speech." "Yes, I did." "Do you want to see if I can teach you how to speak it?" He laughed. "You want to catch me lying." "If you ever lied to me, it was long ago, and in another country." He was an honest person, but rarely a direct one. That tickled him, and he said, "In another country I may tell you other lies. But I thought you were forbidden to teach your mind science to the natives until we joined the leGuin." "Not forbidden. It's not done. I'll do it, though, if you like. And if I can. I'm no educer." "There are special teachers of the skill?" "Yes. Not on Altera, where there is a high occurrence of natural sensitivity, and, they say, mothers mind speak to their unborn babies. I don't know what the babies answer. But most of us have to be taught, as if it were a foreign language. Or rather, as if it were our native language, but learned very late." I think he understood my motive in offering to teach him the skill, and he wanted very much to learn it. We had a go at it. I recalled what I could of how I'd been educed at age 12. I told him to clear his mind, let it be dark. This he did, no doubt, more promptly and thoroughly than I ever had done. He was an adept of the Handara, after all. Then I mind spoke to him as clearly as I could. No result. We tried it again. Since one cannot bespeak until one has been bespoken, until the telepathic potentiality has been sensitized by one clear reception, I had to get through to him first. I tried for half an hour until I felt hoarse of brain. He looked crestfallen. "I thought it would be easy for me," he confessed. We were both tired out and called the attempt off for the night. Our next efforts were no more successful. I tried sending to Estraven while he slept, recalling what my educer had told me about the occurrence of dream messages among pre-telepathic peoples, but it did not work. "Perhaps my species lacks the capacity," he said. "We have enough rumors and hints to have made up a word for the power, but I don't know of any proven instances of telepathy among us." So it was with my people for thousands of years. A few natural sensitives not comprehending their gift and lacking anyone to receive from or send to. All the rest latent, if that. You know, I told you that except in the case of the born sensitive, the capacity, though it has a physiological basis, is a psychological one, a product of culture, a side effect of the use of the mind. Young children and defectives and members of unevolved or regressed societies can't mind speak. The mind must exist on a certain plane of complexity first. You can't build up amino acids out of hydrogen atoms. A good deal of complexifying has to take place first. The same situation. Abstract thought, varied social interaction, intricate cultural arrangements, aesthetic and ethical perception, all of it has to reach a certain level before the connections can be made, before the potentiality can be touched at all. Perhaps we Gathenians haven't attained that level. You're far beyond it, but luck is involved, as in the creation of amino acids. Or to take analogies on the cultural plane, only analogies, but they illuminate, the scientific method, for instance, the use of concrete experimental techniques in science. There are peoples of the ecumen who possess a high culture, a complex society, philosophies, arts, ethics, a high style, and a great achievement in all those fields, and yet they have never learned to weigh a stone accurately. They can learn how, of course, only for 500,000 years they never did. There are peoples who have no higher mathematics at all, nothing beyond the simplest applied arithmetic. Every one of them is capable of understanding the calculus, but not one of them does or ever has. As a matter of fact, my own people, the Terrans, were ignorant until about 3,000 years ago of the uses of zero. That made Estrevin blink. As for Gethin, what I'm curious about is whether the rest of us may find ourselves to have the capacity for foretelling. Whether this, too, is a part of the evolution of the mind. If you'll teach us the techniques. You think it a useful accomplishment? Accurate prophecy? Well, of course. You might have to come to believe that it's a useless one in order to practice it. Your Hendara fascinates me, Hearth, but now and then I wonder if it isn't simply paradox developed into a way of life. We tried mind speech again. I had never before sent repeatedly to a total non-receiver. The experience was disagreeable. I began to feel like an atheist praying. Presently Estrevin yawned and said, "I am deaf as a rock. We'd better sleep." I assented. He turned out the light, murmuring his brief praise of darkness. We burrowed down into our bags, and within a minute or two he was sliding into sleep as a swimmer slides into dark water. I felt his sleep as if it were my own. The empathic bond was there, and once more I bespoke him, sleepily, by his name, Therum. He sat bolt upright, for his voice rang out above me in the blackness loud. "Arik! Is that you?" "No, Denley, I am bespeaking you." His breath caught. Silence. He fumbled with the Chabe stove, turning up the light, stared at me with his dark eyes full of fear. "I dreamed," he said. "I thought I was at home." "You heard me mind speak. You called me. It was my brother. It was his voice I heard. He's dead. You called me, Therum. This is more terrible than I had thought." He shook his head, as a man will do to shake off a nightmare, and then put his face in his hands. "Hearth, I'm very sorry. No. Call me by my name. If you can speak inside my skull with the dead man's voice, then you can call me by my name. Would he have called me Hearth? Oh, I see why there is no lying in this mind speech. It is a terrible thing." All right, speak to me again." "Wait. No, go on." With his fierce, frightened gaze on me, I bespoke him. "Therum, my friend, there is nothing to fear between us." He kept on staring at me, so that I thought he had not understood, but he had. "Ah, but there is," he said. This has been from Ursula K. leGuin's The Left Hand of Darkness, and I am Ivy Tara Blair, wishing you all only the best.
To see my mother, she said she'd meet me when I come. So I'm just going over Jordan. I'm just going alone. I'm just